All right, so we're at 7 o'clock, so I'm going to call the April 28th, 2020 Board of Selectmen's meeting to order. Can I please get a roll call vote?
Bowman present.
Yeah.
Cortez present.
Davis present.
Hughes present.
Morris present. I do have under Chairman's announcements, I wanted to actually give a quick shout out to my daughter Miranda, who made one of the Beaumont Hero program, and for a lot of the hard work that she's been doing over at the Nursing Home and Rehabilitation Center, trying to take care of some of the elderly with the COVID epidemic that's running, unfortunately, pretty wild through the senior center. So she's doing good work and proud of her, and way to go, Miranda.
There you go.
I don't have any other announcements. I am going to jump a little bit on the agenda. I'm going to do item number 2 first. That is the National Grid tree removal program. I believe we have Don Crocker from National Grid, who's a forester, that's on the call as well.
Yes, I am.
Excellent. So if you could, Don, just kind of fill us in a little bit on the public shade tree removal permit that you're looking for, and...
All right, so in DPU docket 15-155, the DPU directed National Grid to submit a filing that proposes a different course of action with respect to implementing an enhanced vegetation management pilot program with the goal of further reducing tree-related incidents, customer interruptions, and impact on municipalities along worst performing circuits caused by major weather events. So what that's saying is National Grid we've implemented this program. This is the second year of it, where we're going along and outside the regular specs of standard trimming, because in the past it just hasn't been effective enough to control the amount of outages on that particular circuit. We're doing a more intense work along the main lines, the 3-phase lines. What this does is, if we eliminate as many of the problems as possible, then what it does is it gives us the availability to be more responsive to the outer parts of the circuit, when a weather event comes into effect. The program entails, the parameters of it is clearing ground to sky 8 feet from both sides of the circuit, of the lines of poles. In most cases, one side is the road, so usually all we're doing on the other side of the road is some trimming of trees that are hanging over the roads that are close to the lines. But on occasion, we're finding trees that are hazardous. They're dead or dying. They have defects or health-related issues, and they have the potential of coming down and taking up the line. So there are a few trees on the opposite side of the line. The majority of the ones that I've tagged and my teammates have helped tagging are within the same side of the line. A fair amount of them, and I'm sure a lot of you have seen it, are either underneath the lines or relatively close. I saw a few trees that are less than a foot, from the lines. And there's no way to really trim that and keep it from being
Personally, shout out and didn't fucking text me, and I went on there, and he's like, yeah, I missed it.
So
How about going on mute?
I guess from here, if anybody's got any questions, I can answer specifics. And then, let's try to get the specifics.
Mr. Adjournment,
Yes.
can you just give me an update on audiovisual here? Are we having a good meeting, or is the chairman busy trying to figure something out?
I think the chairman's trying to figure out one of those nagging technical problems, but we can go on.
Okay.
Where we had it, does anyone have any questions of Mr. Crocker?
In a nutshell, right, the town needs to have trees removed. Sounds like we're doing that. What cost to the town?
This is an actual grid build. We take out, it's part of, what we have to do to try to keep the outages down. And in the past, the programs have not been effective enough, so we're stepping it up a notch and trying to be more effective, more proactive into it. Obviously, you can never figure out exactly what trees, are going to come down in a storm. Well, the best you can do is, go up there, take the ones that are most likely a problem, or in a lot of cases, or some cases along this, the trees are just, too close to the power lines, and it's too much of a risk of that. And one of the main issues in that town is a lot of power lines, or what we call Hendrix cables, where the three lines are clustered together, being held by a fourth one, and it's a very strong line. It's less potential of breaking during the storm. However, it can be strong enough where it can take down several poles, which then causes more time off on the circuit. So all this is, what we're trying to do. It comes out of our budget. We have a budget set aside for it, and we have crews. The circuit begins in Northbridge, and we have crews that probably begin there in 2 or 3 weeks, depending on weather and stuff.
From where I stand, I certainly welcome it. I remember when I was chairman a long, long time ago, Marcy Reed and you guys did a really good job of pruning some trees for us, and I look forward to seeing your work. I've worked closely with Dave Donahue, who's the regional forester for that area, and I've kept him apprised of the stuff, and I know he's gone through, and he'll be happy to see some of the stuff. The ones, matter of fact, the last storm we had a couple trees that I tagged actually come down during the storm. So it's a good point. At least I know I'm tagging the right trees.
Exactly.
Like a southeast Main Street, I did more of a hazard tree on that road, and probably 80% of what we tagged were dead oaks. And obviously, usually anything we're tagging that are we feel is a hazard or a risk is the same for you guys. I mean, if it's a hazard to our lines, it's a hazard to the roads too. So I know it helps you guys out a lot.
How do you know if a tree has been tagged?
All right, so we use 2 tag systems. One's a red tag, which indicates a removal. The other one is a blue tag, which indicates removing a larger limb. Usually 8 inches or above. If it's standard trimming, we don't tag the trees for that. We do the regular trimming that we normally would do. But if it's a large limb, That's what we call permission trim. We try to get, the abutters or the owners of the trees authorization to do the work. One of the things when we were working on this program, trying to design it, and, what we've done all through last year was, looking at the effect where some power companies have done this, and I've actually seen the effects of it, 6 years after down in Pennsylvania last summer. And, they just kind of used the blind eye and just went straight around the sky, but they didn't take into effect the health of the tree, which is what we were looking at. So compared to other utility companies, we're probably looking at taking out a larger amount of trees, because if we take out more than 30-40% of a tree, it's going to kill the tree. And that's not being an arborist. We look at it as, on the arbor side of it, that if we're going to kill the tree and do what we have to do, we have to take it out. So I just actually looked at the list today. I hadn't even taken a look at the list till today, and I saw how many trees we have. But like I said, a great deal of them are dead or dying. A lot of damage to them. There's plow damage, there's cavities in the trees. I've gotten probably, I'm going to say between 85 to 90% of the abutters signed off on it, agreed to the work. I'm still waiting for a few people. I still have to talk to DCR. But we usually, we try to get, not only the town permission on the town trees, but we also get the homeowners permission. And we only do the work on the people that we get permission from.
Sounds good to me.
I've heard everything I need to hear, that's for certain.
Absolutely. It's definitely a big benefit. I know it'll help Mr. Furno out quite a bit, too. So I would entertain a motion to approve the public shade tree removal permit.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, the motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing as none. Could I get a roll call vote, please?
Vote aye.
Cortez, aye.
Al Davis, aye.
Hughes, aye.
Kevin Morris, aye. All right, so we will sign this off and all set. Thank you very much.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Crocker.
Okay,
Thank you very much. Yep.
so I'm going to bounce back to item number 1, which was a joint meeting with the Finance Committee and Town Moderator. Does Finance have enough members present to have a quorum?
I'm here.
Think so. Yep, Dick Vandenberg here.
Carol Gardner here.
Sandy Maggers here.
Heather Moran, present.
I see Howard, but I'm not getting audio from Howard.
I saw Howard, yep. Howard, can you hear us?
Hollywood.
Okay, he's nodding emphatically, we just can't hear Howard. Yeah.
He can hear us. We're going to defer to Howard with nods throughout the course of the meeting.
Look, Mr. Ed.
Stomp once for yes.
Kind of dating yourself there, Mr.
I
Town
know,
Administrator.
it's a shame.
All right. Howard's back. Do you guys need to call your meeting to order? Howard is saying
Yeah, I
yes.
was saying yes. Yeah.
If he's got a camera, he has to have a microphone.
Yeah. Yeah, he's got low signal on it.
Oh, that's why that.
Howard, did you come in using a Chrome browser? So, because if you're using Internet Explorer, that could explain part of your audio problems.
You can call by phone, can't you?
Yeah, or you could just dial in by the phone number. Do you want to call in by phone, Howard? Okay.
Yeah, just hit your unmute, Howard.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, okay,
Where's Carol?
There's Carol in the bottom of the internet.
amazing.
Okay. So why don't I call the committee meeting?
I think we need to
We do
fix
have
that.
four.
Let's see if he's in twice, which would explain it.
I think somebody's mic is too hot, and so it's feeding back.
Yeah, I think it is. Hold on. Let's see if this helps it. Where is he? Howard's, no, it wouldn't be Howard. He's muted.
Now he is.
Now he is.
Yeah, it's not happening now. Nope.
You hear me on the phone now?
Ah, perfect.
Thank you.
Yeah, somebody's speakers are hot.
Okay, so let's call the finance committee meeting to order. And we have a quorum. We can proceed.
Excellent. And I see Keith is available as well. All right, the reason that we wanted to have a joint meeting this evening primarily was to talk about, a little bit about town meeting and then also discuss the budgeting potential or looking at trying to plan a budget for the next years following up. A memo did come out from Mr. Wojcik earlier, and I will defer to him to go into a little more detail on the memos and thought processes behind it. Is that,
Before we keep going, everybody might want to mute their audio unless they're speaking, and it'll probably stop a lot of that reverb.
I wonder if it's because Howard's got dialed in and his computer speakers, if his phone is picking up his computer audio.
that's probably it.
Because it started when he dialed in, so that would be my guess, if he's got two speakers going.
So it's all your fault, Howard.
Well, Howard's taking a beating here.
Speakers, cameras, microphones, it's all so dazzling.
All right, so we will defer to you, Mr. Wojcik.
Well, don't defer to me, because we're asking you guys to make decisions tonight, both
Well,
of these committees.
For a briefing, how's
For a
that?
briefing, yes.
I'm deferring to you for a briefing.
Always happy to babble. Gene and I have been going around about this, and we're taking our time because we don't really want to bog down and spin our wheels and make any mistakes with establishing, first and foremost, a meeting date or an approach to town meeting. And the memo, the fiscal note, which is a public document, I'll ask it be posted on the website along with the other fiscal notes. I'm not sure if we've been keeping up with that, but anytime we change the budget forecast model, or we think we need to change it, or we need to run a scenario, we publish fiscal note, which discloses the thinking behind the decision to make the recommendation. 2 meetings ago now, which would be 2 weeks ago, there was a hearing at the State House regarding the state of Massachusetts revenue outlook. And it was a rather glum meeting because there was extensive discussion of lottery shortfalls and sales tax shortfalls and other significant, revenue interruptions for the Commonwealth. And they were predominantly made in a press release and some modeling that had been done by the Taxpayer Foundation. And nobody seems to dispute their numbers. They seem to be a rigorous group of thinkers. And it led us to come back to the town budget and say, well, we've got two issues. Given the state's revenue picture, it may be difficult to schedule a town meeting without having a consensus revenue budget from the state to inform us as to what we should put into our budget. In the alternative, our own revenue uncertainties and our own budget uncertainties and priorities would suggest that at a minimum, we need a special town meeting before the close of the fiscal year in order to cleanly and appropriately make interdepartmental transfers and other budget adjustments that we may need to make. And perhaps then, on Gene's recommendation, also consider only financial articles for fiscal '21. Now, there would still be quite a few articles on the warrant because there's a number of things that we have to check off. Salaries of elected officials, in different budget items, water, sewer, cable, and others. The sense of urgency, though, is that the town of Douglas has a significant reliance upon state aid, and relatively small changes to state aid figures to the town have a very large impact on our budget outlook from the revenue point of view. And I've presented 6 items here in this fiscal note, consulting with Jean and some of her staff, on what we can anticipate would be areas that either are going to change or are not going to change. The first is new growth. Jean is always very conservative. Jean and Beth McKay, our principal assessor, are very conservative when estimating new growth. It's not unusual for us to put 80,000 in the revenue budget and then realize an actual of 400,000, because we're not going to predict the building trade, the building and construction industry, and whether or not they're flourishing or not. We usually have decent information from building permit activity and inspection activity, so we know it's being booked, but at the same time, some of these people go bankrupt overnight and they don't finish their project, et cetera, et cetera. So we're always very conservative with that. And we're not going to recommend a change there. We're going to keep it at 125,000. So our base assumption is 80. And we think it can be up to 125 because of North Village building activity and extensive building permits continue to be taken, and buildings are being built. That is the primary driver of new growth in town, and it has not stopped. The second item is excise taxes, permits, and fees. We often refer to these as local receipts, and the typical plan every year is to increase that by 2%, and that's actually also typically been very conservative. So we put a number in the revenue budget, and we outstrip that number usually by a factor of about 10% each year. For the change from fiscal 20 to 21, we thought it would go up 2%, which is about $29,000. We're looking at that perhaps only going up 1.25%. And as a change from our estimate in the budget, that's a decrease of about $47,000.
What was the, because I know when we were going through the recession, that was a major issue in the budget, was that excise taxes were not hitting the rates that were anticipated. Do we have any historical data from then to say, kind of what the rate of growth or lack of growth was during that time?
So that's an excellent question. We've used the 2008-2009 so-called Great Recession. If it's a Great Recession, it should actually be a depression, but never mind. As our benchmark, because that's the most recent economic disturbance in the United States that we can use as any kind of benchmark. As you go further back than that, and a whole bunch of things are different about the way the economy was working, not the least of which is working remotely. The excise taxes, I am much more bearish about them than Jean is. If Jean is still on the call, right?
Yeah.
So I will go through what Jean and I agree upon, and then I'll just kind of throw it out there for conversation. We know that we have to take penalties and fees and interest on taxes and take that number down, because through operation of state statute, we're going to postpone the demand and postpone that due date. So all of those penalties and fees, we're going to just take that down from about 100,000 to about 70,000 in the budget. And that's going to drive most of this change to excise tax outlook. A lot of this is driven by the value of motor vehicles, or the way the motor vehicles are being taxed. And obviously, if you don't buy a car, it's another year older, so there's that deterioration of the base. But if your car doesn't work at all, you're going to buy a new one. So there's this sort of natural progression in the marketplace, and most people, if they can make their car last a year or two during an economic downturn, they try to. And that's why excise taxes erode during those periods. So I'll let Gene take it from there. I mean, I don't think, what we're agreeing on here is that we don't want to take it down too far, just because we underestimate so much to begin with that we don't know, we don't think that we'll miss the budget number, because our actuals are typically so much higher that we can sustain a substantial erosion and still hit the budget number. Does that make sense? But I'll let Gene explain it if I didn't explain it right.
Yeah, I think I'm in agreement. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Keith, we are conservative with motor vehicle excise. What we have budgeted is just $1.1 million next year. $1.1 million. The actuals for FY19 was $1.375 million. So we're still very conservative with motor vehicle. We've already hit our target for FY20. With that said, that it's not a question of whether or not people drive a car, it's whether how new they are. So I agree that if the economy stays the way it is, people are going to be buying new cars, but we're still really conservative in that category. And I agree that it's the penalties and interest that we're taking the biggest hit on, and that's because for this particular year, FY20, we did push out the demands. We did not issue them to kind of give a break to the taxpayer, to allow them some time to pay the bill prior to the issue, understanding that we have to collect the revenue before June 30. So if you look on the website, there was actually a tentative demand date for motor vehicle excise, real estate, water, sewer. We still need to collect the revenues, but we're trying to give people some time to get their finances, get the stimulus checks in, and if they are collecting unemployment, to allow some time for that to come in. So, we're watching closely the revenues on all avenues, but again, we have met the motor vehicle estimates for FY20 already, and I feel that we're pretty conservative for the 21 estimate. It's the penalties and interest line that I think is going to be taken down a little bit, because you cannot put on next year's tax recap more than you collected in FY20. And because there was a delay and we did not collect as much in those two categories, penalties and interest, we can't put on more than what we'll collect. So I expect that to hit a drop.
Should I move on now to another topic? The next on the list is building permits. Again, this is driven by North Village. I've already addressed that. We broke this out separately as we were trying to track building permit activity and total revenues back to the outside contractor for building inspection services who was charging us to supplement our part-time building commissioner. We think the building permits activity is going to continue. I'm taking the outside contractor out of the mix because our commissioner has got his legs under him and he's able to do all the inspections. There's no need to spend the money on the expense side of the budget. But for the purposes of revenue, we don't anticipate a change here because of the size of those permits and how much higher they were than our estimate for building permits. The core of building permits, the people adding onto their homes or doing all those smaller projects where they have to get a permit and that those revenues are coming in. First of all, they tend to be small little bumps of revenue. they may not occur because of the economic downturn, but their impact on the overall budget is less than this large 40B development. Somewhat more complicated is the cannabis impact fees in the town's host community agreements with Resonate. I'm not going to offer them anything they haven't negotiated for, but it is a point of discussion that it's in the budget because the town's operating legal documents made it a certainty that we would collect that revenue. Because 1 year, actually, on the recreational side, it was 6 months. On the medicinal side, it was 1 year. Revenue would begin to come to the town with a date certain that starts the clock ticking, which was the day they opened their first retail establishment. And the day they opened their first retail establishment was March 24th, 2020. So whether it's 6 months for recreational or 12 months for medicinal, both of those due dates would arrive in fiscal '21. So because the business is operating and they have a legal obligation to the town, it's in the budget. The question I've posed, and I still don't really actually have an answer from, and I might even ask the CCC this, is can we toll the clock on recreational marijuana HCAs if recreational marijuana is not allowed to be sold during the COVID-19 shutdown? I do believe we should have a decent, fair business relationship with our partners, and I don't know that I think you might be able to enforce it against him, but if he can't sell the product, then he's not going to have the revenue to give us. So I've taken the recreational side out, but not the medicinal side. So they would still owe the town at 12 months in. What that means is we would be foregoing the first year of recreational marijuana impact fees of $80,000. But you're adding that now to the $47,000. Then the numbers start to get big, and they are on the cherry sheet. The first one is education, Chapter 70. You would have to think that the Commonwealth will do everything it can to defend Chapter 70 from cuts before they defend other revenue items coming to the towns. However, if you go back to that recession of 2008, 2009, there was a reduction of close to 2% in the town's Chapter 70 allocation. Assuming, for the sake of argument, with no other better basis to make a forecast, that this economic downturn, at least in the short term, could be 2 times worse, because projections of unemployment are 2 times worse than was realized in 2008, 2009, and revenues drive off of economic activity. I would say the worst case scenario is we could see up to a 4% decrease in Chapter 70, which for Douglas would represent a revenue shortfall of $386,773. More importantly, numbers-wise, is all the state talking heads refer to it as UGA. It's unrestricted general government aid.
That's it.
It's a fancy way of saying revenue sharing. I guess we don't say that anymore because it was supposed to be a lottery and everybody got fooled into thinking that it was going to be a lottery. But UGA has had its ups and downs over the years, and it does track fairly closely to budget stress at the Commonwealth level. And there was a very substantial reduction in UGA during the 2008-2009 recession. And again, thinking that this recession could be that much worse, for purposes of a worst-case scenario, I'm factoring in a 50% reduction in UGA, which is a loss of $409,159. The total of all of these revenue impacts on our revenue budget is a decrease of $923,132. For the sake of talking about it, let's call it $1 million shortfall. So that's what we're looking at as something that we don't want it to happen. We're not advocating that it should happen, but we definitely should have a plan in place in case it does. How does this affect town meeting. Well, if you know that that's the size of the problem you face, when do you want to have the meeting based on how much information do you think you'll have? Or alternatively, what your operational imperatives will be. I think Jean speaks a lot better than I do to the necessity. I agree with everything she's about to say, but I just think she does a better job of presenting it. Jean, do you want to kind of lay out your plan for the schedule as you see it?
With the hopes that we will be able to hold a town meeting, and Keith, I don't know how creative that you're willing to get on that, if they don't allow us to meet in one area. It is my hope to have both the special and at least the financial articles of the annual, with the understanding that the annual town meeting for the omnibus budget would be a baseline budget. We won't have state aid numbers. We won't have certified new growth. So we would do what we've normally done over the last couple of years in tight budget situations, is we've used the fall town meeting as the opportunity to use the budget. Now, that just laid out some very difficult situations that we may be facing. So it would, whatever base budget we put forward, it would be under the understanding that departments would be looking to have some constraints placed on that, in that it would be for what needs to happen up until we have better information. The articles that I requested be put on the annual town meeting, on the finance committee report, the elected officials, that allows the elected officials to be paid, the remaining budget, FY21 water sewer, FY21 transfer station, FY21 cable, and the BBT budget as well. Now, you can decide what you want to do with BBT. You can put in what their budget request is, or you can look at their budget and take out any additional money above the base that they have to vote. You can, do that at the annual and look to adjust it again at the November town meeting. We've done that in the past as well, but those would be the articles that I'd be looking for to happen in June. This allows us to run, start July 1st in a good place, a decent place, but allow us some time to make some adjustments at the fall town meeting before the tax rate's set.
What you said depends on how creative I'm willing to get. I think my question is how creative is the state willing to let me be?
Well, I think some of talking about Zoom or whatever this platform is today. I don't know. I guess I defer to what the other moderators are doing. I know that there are some communities that are already planning their June town meeting. I think people that sit in my seat want that to happen very badly. So they're going to be pushing their administration and their FinCom and Board of Selectmen to kind of go forward with that. Is the governor going to allow this type of forum? I know one community, the DOR, they actually had an outdoor meeting. They social distanced outside and they held it that way. It was a smaller community, but Rich would probably be a good resource for you to see what.
Yeah, I mean, this is when this first started. I'm not sure if you were in the email loop, but I had actually asked Rich kind of about what options we might have and kind of how creative we could get as far as like virtual meetings and that kind of stuff. And I don't believe that the state is allowing such things yet. I don't have an issue with doing a June meeting. I think it's ironic that one of the things I'm known for is making people move in closer together, and in order to make sure that we're maximizing space. And now I actually have to ask people to spread apart and and possibly wear face masks, and there's certainly a lot that might go into it. But look, I mean, town meeting, as a historical meeting has been somewhat flexible in the past anyway, as far as it used to be held in churches or wherever they could find enough space. I have an idea that might be kind of crazy, but Oktoberfest has a radio transmitter, and if we needed to, we could probably still have it at the high school. Everybody would be in their cars, and we could broadcast it over the cars, over the car stereos. So, yeah, I mean, obviously, I prefer not to take on heady articles that
What happened?
But, I think we could certainly figure out one way or another to have a meeting at the high school.
So, Keith, my thoughts on it quickly is, I mean, I can understand the benefit of doing the transfers under like a small special town meeting with a couple of warrant articles. I'm just not seeing, in my mind, I'm not seeing a huge benefit to trying to even put together a provisional budget, without really having a better understanding as to where we are revenue-wise with the state. I'd be more inclined to do a small special town meeting with a couple of quick warrant articles on it in order to get our transfers done, and then look at doing an actual annual town meeting sometime in the fall when things are a little more settled down and we have a better picture as to, is social distancing going to be re-implemented, and how we can actually pull one of these things off without having to get too creative.
I guess for me that gets a little more troubling when it comes to we do have
I don't know if it was like this for anyone else, but Gene, it just sounded like you're talking into your arm.
Callie Brown? Like Callie Brown, can you hear me now?
Yes.
But Keith, you might want to mute yourself.
I think we're hearing now some of the problems we might face.
Go ahead, Gene, try again, because I think it was Keith's microphone that was.
I understand your concerns, Kevin, and I hear some of them. So it makes it a little more challenging when you're looking at what they call a 1/12 budget, and then you have the elected official piece, and I have to find out information on that because that is a separate article. We do have one employee that's elected that is a traditional employee as opposed to a board member. So I wish we could find some way to vote a budget with the understanding that we would probably have to adjust it in some way in the fall. We know that we have to fund the school at a certain level. We have to fund them in that school spending. We know we have to fund the team at a certain level. So those pieces are known. Without getting into too many details, the 7 articles I presented did not include the personal compensation schedule. So that would be level funded until we voted that at the fall town meeting as well. I think it's a little less complicated to put something forward and do an adjustment than it is to do like a 1/2, say, okay, when are we going to have it?
Well, I can see both sides to that. I mean, I think if we were going to try and propose any kind of a budget, like to your point, like it's minimum net school spend, so whatever that bare bottom dollar is that we're required to fund them, then that's what it goes, and the same thing would go across the boards. I mean, I don't have a right answer to it, I guess.
Just a technical question, Gene, can you set a net school spend figure without knowing your Chapter 70 number?
I believe we already have, I don't have it handy, I believe we already have the net school spending number for FY21.
Based on what, the preliminary cherry sheet?
No, it's based upon, well, DESD puts it out, so I can give you that information tomorrow.
All right. So Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Yeah.
I see the merits of, and there's a lot of strong arguments for what Gene has said. There's also other considerations on both sides, and interest of getting all those arguments on the table. We could do a 1/12, it's not really a 1/12 budget. It's a month budget. It's a minimum of 1/12 of the prior year's budget. But it would not be that easy to do. So July is a really big outflow month for the town of Douglas because we tend to pay the town's retirement obligation and our property and casualty insurance premium all at once early in the fiscal year so that we get a prepayment or a prompt payment discount that a really substantial amount of money between those two things. So it really should happen. So your July budget would be probably closer to 1/11th or even 1/10th of the whole annual flow. And because you have other quarterly payments for things that'll be due as well. And then you go dip down a little bit lower for August and September. So each month's budget would be a project in and of itself. Having said that, I think I've made it clear where I'm coming from on a lot of this stuff. I'm not an accountant. I'm probably more of a microeconomist than a macroeconomist, but I don't see the transition back to normalcy being very simple or on a straight line progression. I think we're in for a tremendous roller coaster ride. The federal government has injected $2 trillion, which is pretty much the entire gross domestic product of Canada, into the economy in 1 month. That's 10% of our GDP for the whole year. So the US GDP is about 20 trillion. They just put 2 trillion in, lock, stock, and barrel. And if economic activity doesn't grow back and support the additional money supply, you may end up with a situation not terribly different from the energy crisis in the 70s, where the economy slowed down because certain things got real expensive and hard to get, and the federal government did prime the pump, so to speak, to try to help people get through that. And what they did was, wages were sticky, but prices were not. So, and I guess this is personal for me, but people who were working for a living, like my parents, saw no change in their wages, but their cost of living went through the roof. And so our quality of life just deteriorated because it was called stagflation. I was only, 5, 6, 7 years old, so I don't know what the effect that had on municipal budgets, but what it does is it slows down and makes economic recovery uneven. And that may be much more important in other communities where they have large manufacturing bases and retail bases, or mostly residential. But having said that, we could be going through peaks and valleys, and then notwithstanding the disease itself that caused all of this disruption is as unpredictable as anything. You know, we're having news reports today about disturbances to the food supply network, not because there were never restrictions placed on those workers. So we have people talking about lifting restrictions and getting the economy back to normal, saying that we don't know what will happen. We do know what will happen. We just need to look at the meat industry to understand what happens if we lift all the restrictions too soon. A whole bunch of people will get sick really, really fast. There's no guarantee that they will or that they won't. We just don't know what this thing's going to do when we start to get active again. And so we could go through a period of up and down. It could come back in the fall. The more flexibility we build into our budget model and our budget planning system, the better. And that's where I guess if I had to make a recommendation and come down on one side or the other, I would recommend trying to hold off on town meeting until we have a lot more data, including a consensus revenue budget, some sense of where the economy and the pandemic are headed. And I think on this, I think Jean and I agree very strongly. I'm not going to speak for her, but we had this conversation earlier. This really is a 2-year budget planning cycle. Because if you just try to limp through 21 and you don't think about what could be around the corner in 22, we're not being thoughtful about the town's finances. If the recovery takes more than 2 years, then it's just a completely different kind of problem. But if we look at this as a major 2-year disturbance with some hope of recovery at the end of it, we ought to be putting the pieces in place to have a robust, sustainable operation through those 2 years. My predilection is to cut spending in order to bring it down and not fiddle with the revenue base outside of that unless it's absolutely necessary. From my experience, sometimes it's good to have bad experiences. So from my experience working for a city that went bankrupt and for a town that's about to go bankrupt because they figured out today that they've been relying upon casino income for their operations, and the casino's closed. Anyway, those beauties. What you don't want to do is erode your ability to levy or stall your ability to levy to the point where 5 years from now you want that year back.
Right.
And you can't get it back because you don't want to do another override. So it's very challenging to make this system work if you start to chip away at your levy. And that's the road to perdition, and I've seen it happen in 2 communities that are not, listen, different state, but not terribly different. Municipal finance is what it is. The basic core elements are all the same. So I'd much rather be kind of a hawk and go through the budget, try to save. I mean, I think, listen, it's about personnel. If we had to go to our folks for a year and say, this may be a no COLA, no step, no lane year, be glad you have a job, do your job, and then maybe when we get to the fall, the whole bloody thing will clear up faster than we ever thought, and there'd be a conversation at town meeting about what to do about that. But that's where the rubber meets the road in terms of the budget. We don't spend much money on anything in terms of expenses. We buy fuel, we turn the lights on, we keep the trucks running, we repair things when they're broken. It's all driven by personnel. So if you don't have a really tight year in terms of COLAs and steps, you end up doing a layoff or furloughs. There's no other way around it.
Well, controlling spending is a lot easier than trying to divine revenues. I mean, it's just...
We're not a business, so we're not selling things.
Yeah, we
But
can't
we are in
just
the
say
business of
change
providing
margin.
essential services.
Yeah. I don't know, I mean, seeing both sides of it, and I mean, I'd certainly like to hear from FinCom on it as well, but I'm more of the mindset of just pause, like just hold off on doing a town meeting until we have a better understanding of everything. That's where I said.
I would tend to agree. I don't think that, without a clear revenue projection, and I think your estimates are good ones. I think they're based on solid knowledge and logic, probably more than knowledge, but we could go really wrong, okay? And we could go really wrong either way. And I think making budget decisions at this point without a clear revenue picture, at the very least, it just opens us up to having to do a big correction later on. I think time is probably on our side here.
So let me go around with the remote members on the select board, and then I'll turn it over to FinCom. Mr. Bonin, you have any thoughts? Tim, you're muted.
Sorry. Question for Matt. Did Resonate sell any recreational marijuana prior to this thing happening?
I don't believe so. So they opened the 24th. The non-essential businesses were already closed, or they were closed that very day.
Yeah, I don't think you got to dollar worth of sales.
I don't think you get a dollar worth of
recreational.
sales out of it. Most of the newspaper articles that have appeared since about the business is that they are continuing to fully staff their operation for the medicinal side.
Matt, is there a act of God in our contract with them? It's an escape for them?
Force majeure. I'd have to go back and look. I don't know.
I don't think so.
I don't think there is, so no.
I can check while you guys are talking, because I've got my computer on.
So, while Matt's digging that up, Tim or Hal, what are your thoughts on town meeting, like initially?
Personally, if our people seem to think that it gives us a little more protection, a little bit of flexibility to hold off, it's not very often we have such powers to break from municipal norms. I'm inclined to do that. History being what it is, town meetings have held in a number of different places, and to be a part of the COVID-19 town meeting, but you can see holding them off is probably a prudent thing to do.
So, Mr. Davis, you have any thoughts on it?
I think we should hold off for two reasons. One, because the fiscal estimates are up in the air. And secondly, how we would actually hold the town meeting is up in the air as well. So I think we should go to the fall and come up with a stopgap measure.
Okay. So for our longest sitting member on the board, Mr. Hughes?
I'm in complete agreement with Al. There's just too many unknowns. And right now, I think deferring is the best option.
So, and Hughes, hoodies look good on you, man. I think you should start wearing those to more selectmen's meetings.
Thanks, I'm glad you noticed.
So with that, Howard, I'll send it across to your board.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me now, Kevin?
I can hear you perfectly.
Okay. So I would agree with Al's 2 points. I think that's my view as well, that both the numbers are just too far up in the air, but when you listen to Keith describe the potential options for how to actually run a meeting, the more detailed the town meeting would be, it seems to me the longer it would be, the more people would frankly stay away from it. And it would, I know my daughter is a high school senior, that the high school is doing everything it can to figure out a way to have a commencement and haven't come up with a way to do that yet. It seems town meeting is kind of the same problem. So to me, I would prefer to see town meeting put off until the fall and find a stopgap now. Anyone else in finance as well with thoughts?
I agree with that. It makes the most sense.
Mr. Vandenberg, you're muted if you were talking.
We did that purposely.
Yeah, I think Al made a good point, and Howard too, so.
Anyone else?
Carol, you have any thoughts?
Kevin, I think that's our consensus coming out of finance.
I would agree.
Okay. So it sounds like they're on the same page that we are, of just gonna delay until the fall.
So I guess,
Kevin, how do we do that?
Would that fall into the, it would be the Board of Selectmen would choose to postpone town meeting to an undetermined date in the fall.
if I'm not mistaken, you've already voted to postpone it to a date uncertain because all plans were off for May 4th a while ago. You might want to formalize it, though, just to be sure, since you're all here and you have a quorum. Do it again, doesn't hurt to do it twice.
What if we just say a date uncertain after July 1st?
Has the state given us a drop dead date for how, because I thought that was part of the special legislation, was that there was a date that it still had to be done. You were allowed to postpone it so long.
You're making me fire up my research capacity. So I'll deal with one at a time there, Mr. Moderator. There is no force majeure clause in either of the HCA's with Resonate. So I'll move on to the next question. You guys can keep talking. That was a very long statute.
I'm sorry, this is Brett Arnold.
Yeah.
Hi, Brett.
I've been listening in. I think the drop dead would only apply to elections. I think it had to be by June 30th. I don't think anything applied to town meeting.
I agree.
But Matt might find different.
No, that's my recollection too. I just want to look at it before I say it.
The meeting's going to be delayed by another 43 minutes where you have to read through that entire statute, but.
No, that's all right.
It'll give time for the echo to catch up anyway.
Nice.
That's true. So while we're waiting on that, I mean, Keith, town meeting's kind of your gig. I mean, are you okay with us postponing?
Yeah, so, you know, it's my gig when you guys hand it off to me. So, you know, I would say that you guys control what's you know on the agenda, and I control the meeting. You know, once it's you know, you guys create it, you give it to the public, and then I take care of it. But you know, so if we're legal to postpone it, and that is what makes the most amount of sense to the board, then yeah, I'm happy to work with whatever needs to be worked with, you know, during these times.
You sure you're okay with not firing up a radio station and having people vote via headlights and all that other good stuff?
I mean, I got to be honest, I kind of got jazzed for about a half a second thinking
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt the fun. I'm curious about the impact this has on the day-to-day operation of staff. There's got to be some prorated activity that's going to have to take place on the back end of this. So I'm curious if Gene has any thoughts to share as to what it does to the workflow. Are there particular challenges that take longer that I don't think probably warrants rethinking it, but I think people here should be aware of the impact that these decisions sometimes have.
Tim,
Well, Gene's in the process now. I guess no. Can you hear me?
yes, Gene.
Yeah, we present challenges, and that's why I was pushing for the town meeting in the first place. I'm going to have to contact DOR and figure out our next steps. As Matt alluded to, you know, we have a very heavy July month because we have debt due, we have our Worcester Regional Retirement, we have our property and liability insurance, and we do take comprehensive discounts on all of those. So it is going to be extremely challenging at a time when, you know, you're already going through year end and, you know, preparing for the audit. So, you know, I'll do the research, and it sounds like you guys were all in favor of holding off to the fall. So we'll see what that entails.
So, and Gene, I think.
If I may, this Howard. Gene, did you suggest though that in all circumstances we would still need to hold some kind of special town meeting before June 30th?
You know, it's always the preference. What we can do in absence of a special is we can have intra-department transfers where both the board and the finance committee have to meet to vote transfers from one department to fund another. And we already have, because we're going to have a town meeting next week, we already have departments that either need that or they need a reserve fund transfer. There's only $20,000 in the reserve fund right now. So I'm going to request that the finance committee meet via some platform next week or the following week to handle some of the smaller items. And then I will work with the departments to figure out the best way to handle the others. If you're not going to have, what comes off the table for transfers is the use of free cash. You cannot transfer, only town meeting can transfer the free cash. Only town meeting can transfer from like stabilization in. So if you're taking those sources of revenues off the table, we can probably handle them through the intra-department transfers. We are running a community food outreach program now, and I don't know what that number is going to look like. That would probably be beneficial to fund at a special. You know, there's a lot of question marks right now.
Jean, are you the person that would decide or be able to tell us how to decide, or that we needed to decide if we must have a special town meeting before June 30? Would you have the ability to look things over in the next week to 10 days?
I already I am in the process of doing that. Town meeting is always the cleaner approach. You know, the short answer. But and a lot depends on the numbers. Again, I don't know how big that community food outreach program number is going to be. I can't answer that. Right now we have the governor saying that the same advisory is going to be in place till May 18th. Does that mean that we're running the program till then? Does it mean we're running it past then? I don't know what that number is going to look like yet. So the special town meeting allows us the flexibility of taking money from free cash to fund that. I can't handle that with a departmental transfer. I can't use free cash as an option. So town meeting gives you a little more flexibility.
Well, a special town meeting is also a very different animal than annual town meeting too. We can put one of those up with relatively short notice and doesn't have the same weight to it, specifically to say I'm going to transfer X amount of dollars from free cash to this department, and then still be able to kind of limp through doing interdepartmental transfers between the two. So if we had to do a special, what do we need, 14 days notice?
Legally speaking, there's not much difference between a special town meeting and an annual town meeting as far as what can be put on the agenda. Actually, there's no difference for what can be put on the agenda.
So, we can still reserve the right to do that at this point.
Right.
I think we hear back from Jean as to how important it is for her to have it, right? And make a determination. There'll be 15, 25 people to vote on transfers. We can handle that.
I think you still have time to set a special. I'm not getting a clear indication from what I'm reading. We have to separate the two topics. One is setting the date of annual town meeting versus approving a budget in lieu. So if the town doesn't have a budget in place for July 1, then you default to this month-to-month budget with the engagement of the state through DOR. I think you might still have to go through the machinations of setting some dates. You might want to try to set a date in June, because then you can always use this other process and have the moderator call the meeting to order and immediately recess it for 30 days. I'm not seeing any other community at this point that has simply decided to go beyond June 30th for a town meeting. And because I'm looking for it, I can't get the governor's, the statute actually to come up that was just passed.
Matthew, are you suggesting other towns in the valley are still on pace for a June town meeting?
Well, Jean can correct me if I'm wrong, because she'll know Uxbridge. I think Sutton is June 22nd.
As I mentioned, most of my colleagues are are encouraging the town meetings, and the Sutton's the 22nd, and I have touched base with a couple of communities where they're looking to hold some type of annual town meeting in June. It may not be to the extent of the special articles like, the road, road acceptance. Really, they're trying to do the financial matters.
Gene, do you have any sense of physically how they're doing those or planning to do those?
How they're going to hold them? I do not. I think the expectation is they're going to be allowed to meet. That could be optimistic. I don't know that they're thinking, and I would defer to Keith on this, see what his colleagues are saying for the other communities.
Sorry, this is Crocker again. I have information here from a Northbridge school committee member that last night they postponed their town meeting until June 23rd.
They're looking to, it's a much easier thing to have a budget in place prior to July 1st.
Kevin, should we have another joint meeting in mid-May?
That would probably make sense. We might have a little bit clearer of a picture. Let's plan on towards the tail end of May, getting another meeting put together joint-wise for both Finance and the Board of Selectmen, and see, we'll probably have some better understanding from the state as to, how we're looking social distancing-wise, or at least maybe the ability to do a town meeting, with the understanding still that revenues are going to be uncertain at best.
Are there any non-financial matters that should be addressed before the fall?
I don't think there'd be anything necessarily that pressing where it could happen. So there's a lot of zoning stuff, there's the usual road adjustments and takings and clarification of zoning code provisions. I don't think, the only thing that I think we need to all bear in mind is that economic development conversations are ongoing and projects may still be ongoing, and there may be a need at some point for a town meeting to approve the transfer of land, for instance, or some other initiative to support economic development. So we don't want to go forever without having at least a special town meeting where it could be properly docketed. I think the answer to a lot of these questions is going to be Chapter 53, and really it defaults back to the moderator and putting things off for 30 days at a time. Oh my gosh, there's so many words here, you have to read them all. Notwithstanding any general or special law, charter provision, or bylaw to the contrary, during and for a period of 5 days after the termination of any weather-related public safety or public health emergency, town moderator, in consultation with local public safety or public health officials, Board of Selectmen, may recess and continue a town meeting previously called pursuant to a warrant issued pursuant to Section 10 to a time, date, and place certain, provided, however, that any such recess and continuance period shall not exceed 30 days. The moderator or a person designated to perform the duties of town moderator may renew the declaration of recess and continuance period for up to 30 days at a time, but not more than 30 days following the date of rescission of a state of emergency declared by the governor. So your town meeting's going to go on that 30-day bump along. So if you set a date before June 30, you cover yourself in case everything goes, the sun comes up and the flowers pop out of the ground and you're able to have a town meeting because it's going to work out. And if that's not the case, you've set a date, so then the moderator can call a meeting to order and recess it. In the meantime, I think the Board of Selectmen would direct the town administrator and finance director to develop a 1/12 budget or a so-called month-to-month budget for the month of July, so all the pieces are in place and we'd be ready to rock and roll.
Yeah, we can float some dates up tomorrow for, like you said, the sun comes out tomorrow and, you know, wipes away the disease overnight and, you know, you get a meeting. You know, under fully expecting that we'll need to delay it an additional 30 days or whatever happens to be after that.
So let's verify that with council and then get back to the Board of Selectmen and FinCom with the definitive answer and then suggest a date
Yes.
for your next meeting, because I think you would still set the date.
Right. Okay. Anything else on that particular issue? Mike, Hal, Tim, anything further?
I just wondered, I think we all voted to postpone town meeting, and now we've kind of had a second thought to it. Is that right?
Well, it's postponed past May 4th,
Yeah, that was
the initial date. And I think,
Okay.
I don't know if we have to take another vote. We don't have a date certain. We don't even, to use the analogy of when the sun comes out and the flowers start to grow, we don't know when that's going to be. I think we're all armed with some better information over what our options will be, but I don't know if we have to take another vote.
David, do we know what the requirement is for notice to the town for the annual town meeting? I understand special is 14 days.
I'll defer to Mr. Wojcik.
I'll defer to the town clerk. Yeah, I was about to say that I think what we'll do is we'll try to reason back now from a date at the end of June, that's what it would have to be.
Right.
Meet all the notice requirements, maintain the town's tradition of mailing to voters and having FinCom send that mailing to inform voters, and follow the rules in terms of time. So I think you've probably got 2 weeks before you really start to press up against time. But we can get this answer tomorrow, so your next meeting, the board's next meeting, and within a week we can do.
Okay.
Have a definitive timeframe.
Hold on. I'm uncomfortable with that, Matthew.
Why is that?
I'm not too excited to be mailing out to the town in the next couple of weeks a notice that town people should be expecting to come to their annual town meeting on, let's say, June 22nd. If, you know, the governor is expected continues to stay-at-home order from the 4th, I really don't want to be telling town people their government is going to run and put them in a position they should expect to come out June 22nd and not put on there, well, only if the flowers come out. I would rather know the answer to what the notice requirement is, so that if we were to have another joint meeting on May 19th and decide then under the circumstances that we wanted to try and run an annual town meeting or a special town meeting about June 22nd, that we would know that, you know, 24 days before it, 34 days before it, would still be able to get sufficient notice out.
Yeah, I don't know that we're disagreeing. I think if the meeting was at the end of June, traditionally, we would have only started mailing your mailer out. Now, let me back up for a second. If the meeting had still occurred on May 4th, your flyer would only be going out in the next day or two now,
Right.
like 2 or 3 days before the meeting. So if there's absolutely no chance that a June 22nd or 23rd or 24th meeting would actually get pulled off, we would probably, everybody would know in advance, and you wouldn't send a mailing out. That would be a waste of money.
That's my question. I thought there was some discussion of sending it and then telling people it was postponed. So can we defer the question till a May 19th meeting?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
See how easy that was, Howard?
I would say in fairness, Mr. Chairman, in fairness to staff and Matt and Gene and company, we should probably have a better idea before then whether we're going to try to hit that June.
Well, I mean, this is still an unfolding situation, and I mean, I don't think we're ever really going to have a really fluid answer on it. I think Matt's going to do some homework on his stuff. By our next meeting, we'll have some additional data that we can talk about, and then we still have between now and the second meeting in, or meeting in May when we have our next joint meeting to determine what our actual steps are going to be. We don't have a gun to our head to do anything right now.
I guess all I would say is that while it's more work, at the end of the day, you know how I feel about this. I don't think budgeting is that hard. I just don't. We know what we have to pay in July, and we will budget accordingly to pay that.
Yep.
We know how many payroll dates will be due. We would know, we would make assumptions about COLAs and steps, basically at zero. And we know what bills are due on insurance and everything else, and we actually have renewals for all of these expenses. So I can't just whip the whole thing up sitting here right now with my computer open in a spreadsheet, but I don't think it would take more than a couple of days. I mean, we don't typically look at the budget as flows out. We just don't map it that way. We map it annually. We don't have these 1 month chunks, but with some effort. I mean, our general ledger is organized by month, so we should be able to get historical figures and make sure we hit the target.
Yeah. I don't think we don't really have anything to vote on or do.
I don't believe we
Well, it's good guidance, though, and I think we're looking at a late June date for something, at least an STM, if we can pull it off, and maybe either a stripped down or full ATM, depending on circumstances. But it gives us a planning date to work around. And meantime, I think the direction is that we would formulate a 1 month budget in anticipation of maybe needing it. And then we'll get the detailed instructions from DOR on how to make it all happen. We will all be in the same boat, all of us municipalities, as we approach the end of June, whether or not we're going to be able to pull off a meeting.
So it's not like we're an island out there.
No, everybody's going to be in exactly the same boat. Almost all the town meetings, there were very few that started right before the pandemic and they were able to get it done.
Right.
I think there's been one town that did one outside, and for the rest, they've all been put off till June.
Gene, I think I heard Tim allude to found money somewhere in there. I thought that was his original opening speech.
Well, today he was looking for a blank check.
Today's conversation involved a blank check.
I know I heard accounting was not that hard.
I promised him that I would not bring that up today.
Can I just, I'll talk to you tomorrow. I was hurt by how quickly you went to a negative place, Gene.
What is it? Once bitten, twice shy?
That's it.
I believe my vice chairman was even saying something about municipal money laundering at one point. I'm not sure.
Not at this point, no.
Well, at one point it got so low, Selectman Bonin was accused of being a Rhode Islander.
Ooh,
Wow.
wow. Can you recover from that, Tim?
Gene, if Finance has a meeting May 12, and we have a joint meeting May 19, and Matthew, and to the extent Keith is involved, set up a tentative date for about June 22nd, does that help you with some structure?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Well, it sounds like a plan then.
I'll probably have some reserve fund transfers for May 12th to handle the more immediate needs. And then we'll have some information for May 19th, and hopefully that will be after the May 18th date. So we'll know more what the governor is thinking, and we can head towards June.
Okay.
All right, so Matt, no motions or anything are needed from us us at this time. I think our previous one will just stand as we had postponed indefinitely.
Correct.
Yes.
All right. Well, I have nothing further on this agenda. And thank you very much to the Finance Committee and the Town Moderator for hopping on remotely and participating in the Selectmen's meeting this evening. I appreciate it.
Kevin, are you okay with the May 19 joint meeting?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. And we appreciate your input and help tonight and asking us to join you guys as well. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
They need to move.
And folks, I'm going to notice the May 12th finance meeting, okay?
Okay, plan on it.
I'm going to move to adjourn the finance committee meeting or ask for a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor of adjourning the finance committee meeting for tonight? Aye. We're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Have a good
you,
night.
Howard.
Good night, everybody.
All right. So moving on to item number 3. Children's Mental Health Week proclamation request and possible votes. So an email had come in to Suzanne. Oh, wait a minute. I've got the email here somewhere. Pardon me while I shuffle paper.
I have it if you don't.
You do? You have it? Thanks. And to Matt from Mila Pomo regarding PPAL is a statewide grassroots family organization advocating for improved access to mental health services for children. Every year they celebrate a Children's Mental Health Week for the first full week of May, which would be May 3rd to the 9th this year. And they're requesting a lot of the local towns and cities in Massachusetts to be part of raising awareness about children's mental health needs by doing a declaration, making that week a Mental Health Week for Children, or Children's Mental Health Awareness Week.
Move we approve the request.
I'll second.
So Suzanne had also sent out an email asking the rest of the board to approve allowing signatures from just myself and Mr. Cortez to avoid people from having to make trips into town hall. So we could get this signed this evening and sent back out to the powers that be.
Amend the motion to allow you to sign the request proclamation.
All right, motion's been made and seconded. Can I get a roll call vote?
Dave Cortez, aye.
Al Davis, aye.
Mike Hughes, aye.
Kevin Morris, aye. Would you like me to read the proclamation in before we actually approve it itself? Probably, no?
I'd move that we waive the reading into the record.
Waive the reading into the record? Okay. Can I get a motion to approve making May 3rd to May 9th Children's Mental Health Awareness Week in the town of Douglas?
So moved.
Second.
All right, the motion has been made and seconded. Can I please get a roll call vote, or is there any further discussion on this first? Seeing as none, can I get a roll call vote?
Cortez, aye.
Davis, aye.
Hughes, aye.
Morris, aye. All right, and that has that done. So, and Dave, you want to sign it, leave it on Suzanne's desk after the meeting?
Yes.
The next item is to approve minutes and possible votes. I just barely saw those.
would move that we would approve the minutes of the April 21st, 2020 meeting of the Board of Selectmen.
I'll second.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Holman, aye.
Cortez, aye.
Davis, aye.
Hughes, aye.
Kevin Morris, aye. All right, brings us to your report, Mr. Administrator.
Mr. Chairman, just a quick update on COVID situation. On Monday, the town reported the best available information, that we've had 24 cases of COVID-19 confirmed in town since March 24th. With the passage of time over this weekend and some additional discussion since this weekend, what has happened is Quest made an error in reporting data and bombed DPH with a whole lot of additional testing outcomes that required some retro fitting of the data to make sure that all it was accounted for at the town level and that people had notice. I think what we discovered is we reported what they reported to us, 24 cases, with 22 cases in town and 2 related to individuals who had a Douglas address associated with their name, but they were in long-term care facilities well outside of town. After really digging into this, it would appear that we've actually double counted those people. So they were in, at least one of them that we were able to confirm so far has been in a nursing home outside of town for more than 3 years. When the test result came in, it was accounted for in Douglas. The person, in fact, was in a nursing home outside of Douglas. And unfortunately, for that person and for the family, that person has passed away. So we should never have had that person in our original numbers, and then we shouldn't have added the person on after the reporting was cleaned up this weekend. So I think we're on track right now thinking that as of Monday, we actually had 20 cases.
Okay.
Because that person was never, well, not never, has not been living in town for quite a long time, and for some reason got scored to a specific address here. And then also, I think, got counted in the town where they were living in the long-term care facility and passed away. So, with one exception, everyone who is not currently listed as quarantined has recovered and been cleared to return to their activities, whether it's the stay-at-home piece or if they're essential employees, they've returned to work. We've never reported one specific aspect of the data that came out pretty early on because there's been a lot of back and forth, first of all, trying to clarify it, and secondly, because there is so much uncertainty around it. At a point in March, the town, it was actually late March, early April, the town experienced an unattended death in town. It was not determined until after the person passed away that the person tested positive for COVID-19. The medical examiner never took custody and therefore never determined the cause of death. So out of respect for the family, because it's a known family and a known address, we didn't report this uncertainty around this individual's passing because it wouldn't be appropriate. I can't say, nobody can say, no doctor can say with certainty that that diagnosis, that positive test result was a direct cause of that individual's passing away. So I'm not entirely sure, and I know the town nurse isn't entirely sure either, whether the state's count of those people who have passed away includes that individual or not. I think as time goes on, we scrub the database, we'll get to some real answers about this. We still have that one other person we know is in a nursing home should not have been in our numbers. We still have not verified exactly what's happened to that person. Unfortunately, nursing homes are a tough spot to be right now. The other phenomenon we're seeing in town is we'll get a report of a positive test at an address, and a couple of days later, we get another positive test because someone else living in that same address has also contracted the virus from the person they're living with. So, in a way, it has changed in the way that it's generating numbers, it being the virus. It was spreading around. We had cases all around town and these individuals. And now there's concentrations all around the state in nursing homes, the veterans' homes, and first responders and frontline medical workers and their households. Seem to be just a major part of what's driving the numbers right now. But the numbers are not down. They go up and down. Today we were up quite a bit from yesterday, but not as high as we were over the weekend. So
Those are the state numbers you're
state
referring to.
numbers. And I think it just bears out the fact that the only thing that the state is really proving with its testing effort is whether or not individual A or individual B actually has the virus, and what are we going to do with that person, and counting the number of cases we've identified. But it's not at all a scientific sample of how many people may have had it, how many people still do have it. It's just not, that's not what this testing is determining right now. So we're in this for at least through May 18th now. With that in mind, we understood and wanted to be proactive about helping people who are in need, especially people who will be quarantined or people who are vulnerable, by establishing a meals program. And as of this afternoon, Patrice reports that to date, the town of Douglas has prepared and delivered 3,050 meals. The town has received donations to date in the amount of $3,975. That's in the donation account that was established for this purpose. We're still gathering invoices from the food orders and the transportation piece of this. At the moment, we're just a little bit higher than the donation account in terms of expenses. Remember, the donation account will be spent first, and then we'll go to other sources. So a lot of folks out there have been really generous. Thank you very much for your support for the program. Thank you so much to the cafeteria workers who have really stepped up and make, this is a well-oiled machine now. They crank out meals, and it's all been very cost effective. I mean, if you think about the number of meals we've sent out and what we spent, it's really not, it's very, very cost effective. The public health angle on this is that when people are vulnerable or people know that they're sick with the virus, they don't have to leave their home and expose themselves to other people. And that's a key part of controlling the spread of the thing, is just keep everybody away from each other. So we've taken those vulnerable people and symptomatic people and given them a reason not to go out, which is, along with the humanitarian interest, is what we were after. A lot of the rest of what we've been working on, we've already covered tonight. The business of the town goes on. We will be going out to bid for fuel for next winter. We're going to grab some salt on the free market while it's still available and inexpensive at this time of year to fill up the barn, because there's a little bit of money left in snow and ice. And meantime, we're just looking at budget scenarios and making sure we are accommodating changes in the economy as we go along with our projections. That's all I had, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So,
Matt, is there any referral source for small businesses in town to get some assistance with federal financing, either through the regional county organizations or anything in the local area, through the chamber? Or?
There's been a lot of traffic. I haven't gotten any inquiries, Selectmen. There's a lot of people stand ready to help. So at the state level, we've got economic development officials, and then we have the Business Development Corporation and CMRPC. Everybody's got their angle on the SBA PPP program and some of the other things that are being done. And if anybody has an inquiry, we've got a list of contacts that we can put them in touch with. The name of the game here is to be the early bird, because the early bird gets the worm. So as the federal government's been releasing these funds, get a qualified application in quickly, or you'll be too deep in the queue to see anything come of it. That's about the only thing we've learned, is that the program was very heavily subscribed from the beginning, because it's intended that the loan would be forgiven. And when people saw it's basically free money, right? So in a way, that's what drove a lot of the activity early on. But they can reach the Selectmen's office, or they can reach out to members of the Economic Development Committee if they have questions. I'm not sure, Selectmen, if anybody in town has applied. We don't have a lot of businesses in the grand scheme of things. It would probably behoove us to go around to some of those that are still open. I know that there are some that are trying to open on a takeout basis, reopen on a takeout basis. But other than the restaurants, everybody else is operating, as far as I know, as best they can.
Maybe some home businesses that we don't think of and we're not really aware of.
Well, that's true, but yeah, and I don't know if the programs are set up to help those folks. Because the payroll protection program, you had to have a payroll. For those folks who are in the gig economy or the 1099s, they got to go through the unemployment system, I think.
Yeah.
1099s can apply for the PPP.
They can?
They can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I guess you get two ways to do it then.
All right.
Tim, do you mean 1099, but, well, no, never mind. I'll take that question.
The thought there would, well, you're right.
I guess I'm trying to think about, would there be a difference between being a sole proprietor and being like an S Corp? If you're an S Corp and you put yourself on the payroll, or if you're on the S Corp, your 1099 would cover what, your profit distribution?
Oh, you pay a salary, yes.
I think with an S Corp, with a 1099, you can do it either way.
Yeah.
And you can pay yourself a salary, or you can give yourself distributions, either way.
All right, do we have anything under open session or topics not reasonably anticipated 48 hours in advance of this meeting? I would take this as a none. Okay. I would entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Motion has been made and seconded. Can I please get a roll call vote?
Cortez, aye.
Davis, aye.
Davis, aye.
Kevin Morris, aye. All right, thank you, everybody. Have a good night.